Luke, welcome firstly to the Genesis studio in Battersea, which is an incredible place on the outside, but I also really like this place. So you got a day with me, I'm afraid, and there are three things that we're looking at, which I think are quite important from a brand perspective.
Sure.
And finding that differentiation in automotive. So we're here now, we're going to go for a ride in a car that I think is doing a really good job from a design perspective.
That's right.
And having a sort of different feel to some of its rivals. Then we're going old school later on.
Perfect.
And looking at a modern interpretation of some classic stuff.
Great.
And some of the details around classic design.
Yeah.
But this place, you know, one of the reasons I really like this is the attention to detail.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you noticed when you walked in, there's an aroma.
Yes.
And this is, you know, like the Shangri-La hotels and places like that. There's an own smell that's the same whether you go to any Genesis experience, and all the fixtures and fittings I think have been really nicely curated.
Yeah.
By Genesis's design chief, who's an ex-Bentley guy. So that's where you think he got his obsession with attention to detail from. But you know, even what you see on the wall, the metallic surfaces here, the flooring, the lighting, all comes from Korea.
And I think from my side, what's so interesting about this experience is the way in which a brand builds a relationship with you.
Yeah.
You know, that I may not have ever considered this particular brand, and I may be meandering through this space, and then of course, you know, I'm welcomed in one way or another, and the relationship starts to build. So I'm really interested to see what that journey's like, because of course we have journeys with brands all the time, whether it be retail or travel or hospitality in general. So it's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to kind of uncovering the brand and what it stands for.
I'm not sure Automotive does that really well yet.
Right.
I think this is a good example.
No, agreed.
Of it.
Sure.
And one of the things I like about this space here is it's taking cars to where people are, not where they're not.
Yeah.
Not one of those horrible out of town.
Yeah. And lowering that barrier to what is essentially a very large purchase, but making it much more accessible and putting it in line with other things which you may be doing.
Absolutely. And it's the same with you know, you've got Boss over there and Breitling and other upmarket brands around you. But I think this isn't necessarily a sales space.
It's an experiential space.
It's an experience. I'm sure they will sell you a car if you really want to, but it is about that.
Absolutely right.
Building that brand relationship.
Yeah. I always think it's interesting as well to get the brand, not just the product, but the feeling of the brand as close to the door as possible, so that because actually when you enter a space like this, because it's so architecturally clean, it's actually very calm. Yeah. But there's always a moment of slight sort of nervousness.
Yeah, that's sort of.
Yeah. As you enter, and then once you're in, you're in. Yeah. But the more you can reduce that barrier, and actually bring people to the front, I think is, you know, the more the better. And that's across lots of different industries. You know, we see that in aviation, in, you know, lounge spaces, or, you know, airport environments.
Just getting people,
bringing them further, you know, closer to the entry point, to the threshold of going from outside to in. You know, one of the things that we talk about a lot is this idea of the brand handshake. Yeah. So that moment where you first interact with a brand, much like any relationship, you know, there's that sort of first, second, and third read. And I often talk about this sort of how formal it might be versus how informal.
Or a hug.
Or an embrace, you know, and of course those things change over time, you know, in any relationship. But we were talking about the key earlier. Yeah. How important it is as an item.
I've got a car key for the car we're going to go in. It's just too big for starters, really uncomfortable in your pocket. I know you can put it on your phone. I spoke to Audi's boss, and one of the things I took up with him was the quality of an Audi key, which is the first thing you touch.
Right, of course.
Put on the table, it's rubbish. But, you know, again, Genesis, the key not only matches my coat, but matches the car, and it's quite a nice thing to play with.
Yeah, it's nice.
And that's important. It's the details. It's about what the door handle feels like when you pull it. Yeah. And whether it feels though some thought has gone into the weight that is in the door handle, and the noise and how the door closes, whether it bounces back or there's a nice thud. It's all those things that are really important.
I always think that driving is a very unique experience. You know, we were talking earlier about this kind of hermetic, climate control, quiet environment that's yours, which is very rare. Yeah. Really, there's not many places you can be. And of course, the act of driving sometimes you go into a bit of a flow state where you can be thinking about, you're on the road, but you're able to kind of consider
it's your
things.
Thinking time.
Your thinking time. So I suppose what's lovely about this is that it starts to communicate that sense of not only build quality, but of that sort of hermetic environment that you're then going to step into and then be a part of. So it's been great to discuss the exterior. Maybe we could go into the car and actually see how it feels on approach, and then when we're inside.
Yeah, and there's more theatre to have a look. Watch the door handles and the lights as we get in.
So I suppose what's interesting is this sort of these little micro or these gestures when you enter the vehicle, of how it greets you. How does it sort of bring you in and host you in a way that we were talking about earlier?
Well, you've seen how you get a light show when you start it up. The handles come out to welcome you, but there's more theatre in here. First of all, you get a pulsing start-stop button, which gives you a clue of what's to come. But I want you to not focus on the screen or the welcome sound, but watch this bit of this crystal sphere in the middle here.
Interesting.
They don't have to do that.
No.
But they have, and that's something that marks them out as being different.
Absolutely.
Which I think is important. I love any form of automotive theatre. Getting it right, not making it too long a process or cheesy. And I think with lights and light is the new chrome. You can't have chrome on cars.
Absolutely.
So the way that the manufacturers and designers are playing with light, I think, is in danger of going a little bit too far.
Yes.
Illuminated badges and stuff like that. But in here, as we said, this is where you spend your time.
Yeah, and I suppose this is we talk a lot about this idea of these emotional signatures.
Yeah.
The signature moments that you have, and these things do stand out. And if they're performing on a very nice sort of functional level, there is a level of emotion to the interior, there's a level of connectivity, and the fact that it's actually doing something useful. It's almost sort of opening up the experience to you, opening itself up to you as a driver or passenger.
Yeah. Well, there's another thing I like in here, the sort of the detail and the radiuses on some of these little bits here, the sort of the metallic finishes.
Yeah.
But it's what we would call a glove box, but I guess in this we call a glove drawer.
Yeah, exactly that.
Which just pulls out, rather than drops down on your legs, which it does in so many other cars.
And it's interesting as well, it has this sort of, there's a domestic quality to it. I even noticed that the seat is almost like the seat is being, pulled out for you as when you sit down to eat.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing, that there's a movement to the seat to allow you to enter and exit the vehicle more cleanly. So I think these things are really, really elegant, actually.
Yeah.
And we talked earlier about that sort of the audible quality of the interior, the build, and how important it is that these things sort of not only look great, but beyond the surface, there's actually a sense that it's been put together well.
And again, I use my ring to test tapping all these surfaces just to see what the quality is like, because that's what the consumer's going to do.
So interesting to see this particular interior. I suppose we're going to go onward now to check out another.
Yeah, I've got something very different to this, but very good in its own way. I would really welcome your view on it. So
perfect.
Let's go to the car park.
Great. Here we are.
This time it's welcome to a Mini. And there is a distinct reason that I wanted to get you into a Mini, which hopefully you will appreciate.
Yes.
And that's because I think Mini has done such a great job, or BMW has done such a great job with Mini, of keeping the brand going and keeping the brand consistent and updating a car with so many fabulous sort of traditional Mini features. You've got rocker switches, you've got a circular screen, which is now an OLED screen, so the latest tech, but also some other little detail stuff in here that the materials.
Yeah. What I like about it is the fact that they've managed to build on obviously a very strong heritage. As we were talking about earlier, there's a kind of a need to not reinvent the wheel every time, and actually maintain some of these details so that you start to build the identity over a number of generations of product.
Yeah.
And it certainly feels that way. And as you say, the materiality is really powerful. The volume dial on this is obviously up a bit more than some of the other products we've been looking at. It's you may not like it, or you may fall in love with it. So it has that sort of slight.
Yeah, I think there is a love it or hate it.
Love it or hate it, exactly.
There always has been with Mini.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, exactly that. Which allows them, I suppose, to be quite brave, because they realise that's the legacy that they have is they can lean into it a little bit. It's a better word.
It's a youthful brand, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think the DNA that they've kind of rebuilt, and is consistent through this as a sort of brand experience.
Yeah, and this circular dial, I mean, this is a really nice representation of something that sits in the memory from yesteryear.
Yeah, and we can flick through the various experiences here down to timeless, and you get a little jingle plays, and then you get the retro dials and everything, and the fonts, which is great. But the other thing I love about this car is it just drives how you would think a Mini would drive.
Yes.
It's tactile.
And it's one thing holding on to the visual aspect of the interior and linking that back, but with a new car, to give it that sense of, I suppose, urgency and adhesion to the road, is just a really, really lovely thing.
And even as an EV, it's difficult to inject the excitement other than through the pace.
Yeah.
But that noise, it's not an engine noise. I like the fact that they haven't tried to develop a fake engine noise.
No.
It's just something.
It's more authentic to the actual vehicle itself.
And it's this sort of knitted fabric.
Technical material. I'm a real fan of this, actually. I think it's almost like a sort of luggage. It's got a really lovely quality, and of course you see the surfaces in a more elegant way.
And it passes the old ring test.
The ring test is critical.
The ring test is critical. It sounds good. And what they've done cleverly, I think, is they've got a cheap plastic underneath and just wrapped it.
Yep.
So it feels premium. It feels cool.
I suppose that the truth of it is, if you have legacy, you can wield it in a way, can't you? If you have something to get hold of historically, you can then use that as a sort of a number of cues. If you don't have that, then some of this stuff may feel out of place, let's say, in the Genesis we were in earlier.
Oh, absolutely.
And it doesn't work, so you have to have that narrative.
But it works in a Mini.
It works in a Mini. But I think in terms of the design of the actual vehicle, the in-car, the actual experience, if you do cater to markets with too much specificity, you can actually reduce what you stand for,
Yeah, and I wonder if that's what's happening with some of the new entrants, some of the new brands from the Far East as well. They're not trying to develop their own themes and styles and just being too...
It's a recipe card almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Designed by data.
Well, here we are.
So this is Mini.
Yes.
We've done Mini. This is an example of how Mini have kind of reinvented the Mini themes. We're now at Everrati, which is a fantastic business that's taking classic cars and electrifying them and keeping them on the road for longer, I guess.
Yes, fantastic.
As well. So let's go have a look there, shall we?
Perfect.
So, Luke, I wanted to bring you here to Everrati because I'm a big fan of old cars.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes they're just not very nice to drive and live with. And what Everrati have done is kind of reimagine these cars with modern bits and pieces, proper headlights.
Breathe new life into them.
Breathe new life into them. That's still very much a Porsche, still very much a Land Rover.
Yeah.
But electrified and just easier to live with.
And so the rejuvenation of this sort of product is not only the drivetrain, but it's also the interior, all the systems within it. So it's more comfortable.
They're coming out as one of today's luxury cars would have done, rather than 60 years ago or whatever, where the paint quality would never have looked that good on an original car, or frankly, probably not even that 911.
It's interesting that this idea of truly sort of old meets new, or, you know, legacy meets new technology.
Yeah.
And how they're dealing with that is a very exciting proposition.
They've done it very sympathetically, because if you look at some of the switchgear, which we can go through in a minute in the Porsche, you know, they've updated the audio system, for example. So, you know, Porsches of that ilk would not have had a great audio system by today's standards, but what they're able to do is put a top-notch system in, potentially even with Apple CarPlay.
Yeah.
But it still looks the same, and you've still got the fabulous dials that have been updated. And the switch
those
gear.
Beautiful details.
Absolutely, they still exist, but now they work.
I think the thing about this for me will be, and we talked about the audio, sort of audible, experience of the interior, but the audible experience of it being switched on, is of course a critical moment with the original.
Yes. And you're not going to get
that.
You might get something different, like as Mini has done with the sound in that car, not try to mimic something, try to reinvent it.
I wonder how much in the mind's eye, how much of the experience of this vehicle is the audible piece versus obviously the aesthetics of, you know, wonderful and the interior. And it's a very interesting balance, that, isn't it?
And I think you will get a lot of people who would just never even consider one of these cars because it's electric, it's not original. But then for enough people, for Everrati to make a sustainable business case, you're going to get people who just want to use them every day, and the look is probably more important, and the feel, than the sound.
Well, they often become, I suppose, in their original state, very protected items. So you're not going to use them every day as they were once used. So actually, if you're breathing new life into it and allowing it to be used as more of a run around or used more frequently, that's actually quite a lovely thing.
I think also you've got to analyse what a car enthusiast is. And there are different types of car enthusiasts, and there's a lot of snobbery around the automotive enthusiasts. That what one person says is authentic, another person disagrees with, etc. But for some people, they might not be traditional car enthusiasts, and it might just purely be down to this beautiful piece of automotive design.
Yes, the sculptural quality of it.
Just want to look at it, but if you can use it as well, and it's not going to cause them the hassle that, frankly, old cars do.
Yes.
Why not? Why not? I mean, these things are fantastic pieces of automotive engineering.
Yes.
Great piece of design, but living with them on a day-to-day basis.
Can be a headache.
It's going to take some enthusiasm to oversee the problems, but if it's going to be something that's going to start first time every time, let's say you've got proper lights so you can see it coming when you're driving down the road, it's not going to throw you over the bumps as much as the old one used to, then surely there's a place for that.
Absolutely.
Away from the automotive snobbery that we get. Ultimately, if somebody wants this sort of car, they're entitled to it.
Absolutely.
And the thing I like about this, it's been sympathetically reborn. With the heart of the original car and the cleverness with which they've updated the switchgear and putting technology in a sympathetic way. So you get all the modern accoutrements that you might want from a car like this. And I think there's a fair bit that both the legacy car makers and the new car makers can take from this. Maybe the new car makers can just find their originality.
Correct. And build on it.
And building it. As you said, it might take time, but not ripping things off like this, but there are little things.
Yes.
We've spoken about some of the new brands, for example, and of all the new brands, the one with a degree of difference is JQ, because it produces cars that look like little Range Rovers. But at least that gives it a point of difference.
And it takes such, and the bravery element is also not just about being brave with what you produce initially, but it's about being brave enough to not make significant changes and to protect some of those pieces of the identity that could indeed become legacy given the right amount of time. I also think there's a lot of legacy brands. I mean, when I looked inside there, as I said earlier, the lack of screen was actually really refreshing. And I think there's something to be taken from that. Somehow, of course it has its place, but maybe there are certain tiers of product where it could be reduced. And some of these brands could, with new products, go back to something slightly more historic.
Yeah, there's a new brand in the US called Slate, which is producing the low-cost pickup truck.
That's right.
And it's almost like tech is optional.
Yes.
You've got wind-up windows. You can have powered windows if you want, and screens, bring your own.
Absolutely right.
And I do think that's something that maybe should be played on a little bit more.
Yeah.
We all carry our tech with us, so why not just transfer it to the car? We have big screens. Do we really need a 15-inch screen? But it's the balance of old and new in there.
Yeah.
So Luke, we've had 3 very different experiences today. What's your thinking in terms of what this can show legacy brands, but also the myriad new brands to build loyalty and emotion and relationships with customers?
Yeah, I was thinking that as we went through the day and we looked at these different vehicle types, that there's definitely a kind of cross-learning from the newer brands, the legacy, and vice versa. I do think that the thing that stands out most is standing for something and building an identity around the values of the brand and the quality that you want to deliver, and being brave around that. So as we spoke about, the newer brands need to find those little marks and symbols, whether it be the exterior or the interior or the technology, that they can hold on to and protect over time. And of course it takes time.
Yeah.
But then again, with the legacy brands, there is a moment where you feel, especially looking inside here, that maybe they can be more brave, remove some of the technology, go back to their roots and actually embrace it again. So there's a kind of a cross-learning, I think, from both directions.
How does that apply to the experience? Because we were at the Genesis studio at the start, but it all has to meld together somehow. Whether the Everrati thing, this is just a traditional workshop. Is that their thing? How does the car and the experience come together?
I mean, for me, I think the vehicle is just a part of the brand. So of course, the experience of entering that showroom, the space around you, how you're greeted, that whole journey, and this kind of heartbeat that you have through that journey and how you're feeling emotionally is critical to it. And we know that once you've bought the car and you've driven off, there's going to be peripheral experiences around that need to be dealt with carefully. So I think that it's equally important, not just the product. And I think there's a centre of gravity naturally around these things because they're a high price point and it's a big decision. But I think a lot of these brands, even in terms of how they deal with community, the way in which you go through the purchase journey, needs to be given the same amount of attention to detail. And that's where it can obviously fall over sometimes.
We spoke about the Chinese brand Neo with its Neo houses and its curation of the community, but that's going to become more important.
And it's an exciting space where you can actually start to build, beyond the product. And we're seeing that across lots of different industries, that there's this sense of hospitality, which I always go back to, I think has loads of different lenses to it, whether it be the product, whether it be the buying experience. So that would be the sum up.
But these brands, if they were people, you'd be saying, find your you and stick to it. Is that right?
Stick to it. Find the thing that is differentiating, that has value to the customer. And stick to it and protect it. And sometimes that means going back in time. And sometimes that means finding something fresh and hanging on to it.
Well, I've learned a lot.
Likewise.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Have a gander.
I'll take the driver's seat.
Okay.